Men and women of Reddit who caught their significant others cheating. How did you do that? And what was your reaction? My ex-husband and his family smoked a lot of pot, still do. His sister, kids, and nanny were visiting from out of state for a few weeks. When it was time to fly home, they left their stash at my ex Miles' house because they didn't want to take it on the plane. My ex asked if I would pick it up because I was nearby. Stupidly, I agree. I don't smoke, and I was willing to carry it in my car for him. To my surprise, I found a note from the nanny to my ex saying she was in love with him, and she was so happy for the time they had together. Obviously, she thought he would get the weed instead of me. While it was incredibly painful at the time, I am definitely living my best life 15 years later. Me ex-husband was an early adopter of sending pee-pee pics. I got his phone to get the numbers of his friends to invite them to a surprise birthday party while he was sleeping off a hangover, and there they were in his outbox, edited to add, "This was more than 12 years ago." When camera phones were barely functional, wife was acting unusual for a few weeks. She would want to spend time by herself on the weekends, and when she came home at night from work, she would often sit in the driveway for 20 minutes on the phone. I'm not dumb. I bought a voice-activated digital recorder and stuck it in her car. I knew what I needed to know in less than 24 hours. I was in the Navy and was out on deployment for 6 months after just recently getting engaged. It's one of those stupid things that young military guys do. One day, I get a letter from my fiancé's best friend telling me that she caught my fiancé and her BF together. This was years before email, and smartphones were common. We write back and forth several times, and eventually it comes out how she caught them, how my fiancé begged her not to tell me, and that the fiancé didn't know that we were corresponding. I eventually get back to the States and plan to play it off as though I didn't know. But too many of my friends intercepted me with the news that Iz wasn't just the one guy, but several, and let me know that she knew that I was aware. Eventually we met, and the confrontation was minimal and tame. We broke off the engagement without a lot of drama. She kept the ring. The best friend and I ended up hooking up, at first as sort of a revenge duck kind of thing, but turned serious. We celebrate our 32nd wedding anniversary this year. Edit maths. This year will be 31. After 20, it's all a blur. I had some really good friends in the next town over where my girlfriend lived, and they figured it out for me. They were super gentle about it and patient with me through my denial. We were together for 5 years, living together for around 4. I came home from work early. When I got out of my car, I saw her peek through the blinds to see who was outside. I walked in the door to her coworker on the couch, obviously uncomfortable and clothes messy, and her locked in the bathroom. I wanted to pummel the shit out of him then and there, but he was a trained MMA fighter, and I would have left the house that night with more than a broken heart. I went to a friend's house for a while. They started dating the next day. Shit sucks. It took a while for me to get trust back in relationships. Edit, her coworker had been to many gatherings, and no, I wouldn't beat a woman's back, even though, yes, she was more deserving. Thank you all for the comments. It was 10 plus years ago, and I'm doing good. Went for my yearly checkup and tested positive for chlamydia. Turns out my ex was sleeping around. Edit, apparently false positives are common with these types of tests, so have your significant other tested as well. I hope you're in a relationship where you can openly talk about such things. He went to Hawaii for a business trip without his wife and kids. Like a good wife, I packed his clothes before he left and unpacked his dirty laundry when he returned home. I found a tiny pair of white cotton panties, no lace, in his suitcase. He had recently dropped a lot of weight, 100 pounds, and played it off that he had bought them for himself. They had no label and were simple bikinis, so theoretically could have been men's as well. It did sort of explain the pretty brunette that followed him off the plane at the airport and kept looking at my kids and I at the luggage carousel, what and back, to make his side piece come face to face with his wife and kids. I made sure he wore those panties at least once a week for the remaining few months we were together. I set out his clothes every day and he couldn't protest. She confessed to her mom. Then mother-in-law called her other daughter and told-in-law, then called me and told me she let me listen in on a 3-way call to her mom and tried to convince mom to tell me, but she refused, which basically confirmed it. It wasn't a big damn breaking moment. It was a lot of little things, like how she'd cancel plans at the last second, or the random phone calls from unknown numbers she'd get. This was back before spam calls were an epidemic, or how her phone was mysteriously off one night when I needed to get a hold of her. I had my suspicions, and then finally it clicked into place when I did some Instagram snooping, and found a guy who followed her who posted a selfie wearing a very unique jacket that belonged to her. I confronted her the next day. She denied it. Tears, begging, all of that. I dumped her and walked away. The next day I messaged that guy on Instagram, and he confirmed everything. Had no idea I existed. He dumped her too. Last I heard, she's an EMT in Utah, Wyoming.
Hope she figured out how not to be a garbage person.
4 years ago, I was dating a girl who became distant and disinterested in a lot of things we both enjoyed together. Despite attempts to talk about it, she only grew more distant, then became less available to hang out, and suddenly was working late a lot. I started getting suspicious about cheating when she was on her phone nonstop. Again, I tried to talk about it, but she wouldn't engage. She also just didn't want to break up with me for whatever reason. I was actually going to end it on my own, but one weekend, when she was seemingly unavailable, some mutual friends told me they spotted her with a dude from her work, and they were all over each other. Coincidentally, she had also lent me her iPad, and it was synced to her phone, so I saw lots of texts between those two over that weekend. They were talking about running away together, etc. He was married and her supervisor. Mutual friends were also composed of her co-workers and reported them to HR. They were both forced to do training on not sleeping with coworkers. They were both denied promotion. His wife left him, and she moved overseas. Sucked at the time. I was devastated, but karma got them good. June 1st, 2018. Normal day. A Friday. My husband had kissed me goodbye and gone to work. I was cleaning the house for company who was coming to stay the weekend. The doorbell rang. There was a man at my door who introduced himself as the husband of a woman who my husband worked with. He was there to tell me that my husband and his wife were having an affair. He had busted them about 6 months prior and had told his wife that she had to end the affair. He thinks that she did end about 3 months, but then they started up again. When he found out they were at it again, he called my husband because he knew if he confronted him in person, he'd be in a jail cell for what he'd have done. On the phone, he told my husband to leave his wife alone, or else he would come and tell me everything that was happening. Apparently, my husband thought that he was bluffing, so I was literally the last to know. My husband never came home again. He got an Airbnb and a lawyer. The divorce was December 21st, 2018. We had been together for 24 years. Still hurts. I owned a house with my fiancé. I woke up in the middle of the night and he wasn't in bed. I went searching. His truck and another vehicle were in the driveway. Then I went upstairs and found the guest bedroom was locked. After barging my way in, I found him with another woman in bed. That bed happened to be my childhood bed. He forced me out of the room, literally grabbed me by the neck and pushed me out and closed the door back. I knew I couldn't do anything at that point, so I called his parents who lived a few blocks away. His dad showed up and another fight broke out. I ended up leaving and staying at his parents until dawn. I moved out that weekend and let the house foreclose. 9 years later, it's finally off my credit report. I'm happily married to an amazing man and we own a beautiful home together. I found a used condom on the bathroom floor. I just emailed him a 30-day end of tenancy notice. I own the house. I was married. Out of the blue while at work, I get an email that says husband's name S wife. When I open the email, it lists off a name and says husband's name married to her. Check on Facebook, English was not the first language. This was overseas. So I do, and what do I see? Tons and tons and tons and tons of pictures of a woman with my husband. The woman and her kids with my husband. The woman and her family with my husband. I was stunned to say the least. It was October 6th, 2017, 7 months after I almost died from an ectopic pregnancy. Yep, we were trying at that point to have kids. After work, I went home and started throwing all of his stuff in the dumpster. He was out of town at the time, so I had plenty of time to do it. Spent all of Saturday and Sunday throwing everything he owned in the dumpster. A month later, I moved to a new apartment and waited until then to tell him I was divorcing him. He then killed himself a few months later. Ex-wife actually asked me for her blessing to commit adultery with another married man. She was shocked when I said I don't support it. She went ballistic, has severe mental health issues, went and did it anyway, and ended up in a psych ward. 2 marriages ended, and now the 2 cheaters are engaged. Little devastated at first. Blessing in disguise. I caught my ex intercorseting a chick and telling her how he missed her on my birthday. I was young at the time, and reacted with crying and yelling. If it ever happened now, I would just get up and leave. No point in trying to mend the relationship because it's near impossible to gain the trust that was lost. Edit spelling error, edit. Thanks for the award. It's really sad how many people have gone through this same experience. I hope all of you are in a better place now. Long-term relationship for 3 years. I took him to the hospital because he had unknown rashes on him. Long story short, he was diagnosed with syphilis. I was tested, and was not no idea how I dodged that. I got treated anyway. I was so stupid in my early 20s. Funnily enough, the girl he was cheating on me with actually told me. She messaged me at 3 in the morning asking if I was still with my ex, and I said, yes, he's asleep next to me. Why? She told me what happened, sent me screenshots, and I grabbed his phone. I believed her, but just wanted to see it all for myself. I left the room and looked through it all. He didn't even try to hide it. I went back in, threw something at him to wake him up and confronted him. Of course, he played dumb. Said he didn't know who I was talking about, blah, blah, blah. Then I said, oh, okay, well, maybe this will jog your memory, and pulled his phone out of my pocket. The look on his face was priceless. He knew it was over. I screamed at him, called him every name under the sun, and then he left the house. This was a year ago, and then a few months after that, I'm being told that he misses me. Ducking pathetic. Edit to make it all worse. I uprooted my life completely across the country to be with this guy, and this is how it ended. I couldn't find my then-wife after she got off work one afternoon evening. I tried to call her cell phone with no answer. She didn't show up to the house until 9:30 p.m. She weaved some tale about getting stuck in traffic. I did some sleuthing and pulled the State Farm Good Driving app up, which tracks your movements. I found out she had been leaving work early, going to the nearby rest area off of the expressway and having intercourse with a 20-something trucker she met at her previous job. I decided to interrupt the festivities one afternoon. I showed up to the rest area, parked in front of his rig, and jumped right up to the door. The cabin shade was drawn. I withdrew the shades and saw my loving ex-wife with a meth pipe in her hand and was going to town on this guy. He had the gall to tell me to give them privacy. I didn't handle it very well. I called the cops. They both were arrested for possession, and I promptly filed for divorce. The icing on the cake is that a few months after I left, she cheated on her new trucker friend and is well on her way to her 7th friend. Godspeed, you wet, musty nightmare. My now ex-husband demanded constant access to all of my social media and cell phone messages and was constantly accusing me of cheating, even though he had no reason to think I would do that. I had nothing to hide. Never even thought of cheating. I was watching our young kids 24/7 and didn't even have transportation since he accidentally totaled my car. One day I handed over my phone for him to check for other men and asked to see his. He hesitated, but then handed it over. There was a long, intimate text history with one of the teenage girls who works for him. He tells me he's in love with her and wants her to move in with us. I was in total shock, dropped his phone cracking it. He retaliated by breaking my laptop. He's a wonderful man, and I miss him every day. Sarcasm. Dated a girl for about 2 years. Like 18 months into the relationship, we're talking about moving in together. Then kinda out of nowhere, she starts becoming distant and irritable. We ended up breaking up. Fast forward 3 months after the breakup, I found that Facebook has a section where messages from non-friends are kept. Turns out my then-girlfriend was banging her ex and the UPS driver that delivered to her store at the mall. She ended getting with the UPS driver and his 3 kids. Last I checked, they're ducking miserable, and it brings me joy every time I think about it. Edit in my messages was a note from the UPS drivers. Then wife my ex not only cheated, but broke up a marriage. A friend of mine was suspicious of her husband cheating as he went to play soccer with friends way too often. He always came already showered as he would sweat playing. One day she sewed his soccer socks together, and when he came back all showered, she saw the socks were still sewed, so he wasn't playing soccer at all. Edit spelled husband wrong, edit too. Whoa, this blew up. Many people are commenting how this doesn't prove he was cheating, just that he was lying. She later confronted him, and he was indeed cheating. Also, many are saying clean socks would have been enough evidence, and that's true. I guess she didn't think that deep about it. This is almost word for word how the convo went. Me you sleeping with so-and-so. Her yeah me want a divorce. Her kinda me okay, I'll file tomorrow. I didn't catch her, she told me. And told me I wasn't a real man, and that's why she did it. She just told me everything she hated about me, went on to why I'm worthless, pulled over, kicked me out the car, and I had to walk back to my place. As far as my reaction went, I went home, cried, went to bed, stayed in bed for a few days, thought I was a terrible person for a few weeks, cut my holiday leave short, and went back to work early to get my mind off things. Edit. This was a while ago now, and I'm definitely in a much better place in my life.